Thank you for joining us today for Integrated Enterprise Excellence, IEE System and Books, an in-depth review by Robert Spencer. I would like to welcome you and thank you for taking the time to join us. I will first address some logistical issues for the session and then introduce our speaker, Robert Spencer. We do have a lot of material planned for this 1-hour webinar, so your audio will be muted for the remainder of the presentation to ensure that we are able to get through the entire presentation in the time allowed. We will not be able to hear you, but you will be able to hear Robert Spencer as he speaks. If you do have text questions, please send those in through the chat function on the GoToWebinar interface, and we do value those questions. Robert has agreed to answer questions during and at the end of the presentation. If we cannot get to your questions, we'll either give you a call or email you with a response. There will also be a recording of this webinar available on our website, www.smartersolutions.com, within 24 hours. You will receive an email with a link to the recording. Thanks for attending. So I will now introduce our presenter, Robert Spencer. Robert Spencer is an adjunct professor in the Master of Science program in Quality Assurance at California State University, Dominguez Hills. He teaches courses in customer requirements analysis, change management, quality management systems, work process analysis, supply chain quality assurance, and applied statistical analysis using statistical package for the social sciences, statistical analysis system, JUMP, R language, and environment for statistical computing and graphics, and Minitab. His experience in business process management system began in the late 70s with federal social program impact evaluation studies using continuous improvement tools and techniques. He holds an MS degree in quality assurance and an MA and a BA degree in psychology. Robert is the editor of the ASQ Quality Management Division Quality Management Forum, which is a peer-reviewed professional journal. Robert, again, this is Elon in Austin, Texas. Thank you for joining us. I understand you're in sunny Florida today. Thanks for joining us.
Right. I am here in sunny Florida. It's in the mid-80s. For those of you in the north, it still is sunny somewhere in the United States.
It is, and we're enjoying it. Thanks for joining us, Robert. The presentation is now in your hands.
All right. We'll begin with a little bit of a background here. There's a slide titled Lean Six Sigma Process Improvement Roadmap and Implementing Six Sigma. This is a landmark book by Forrest Breyfogle. And in my own experience, I would say you need nothing more to sit for the ASQ Six Sigma Black Belt certification exam. This book is tremendous. I've marked mine up with lots of highlighting and probably over 100 post-it notes to tab the entries. It's a real reference source. It should be on your desktop if you're involved in process improvement studies. And obviously, this was the beginnings of a very substantial foundational work in Lean Six Sigma. It took us a leap forward from the initial work at Motorola. And once again, Breyfogle has introduced the next springboard platform with Integrated Enterprise Excellence. And that's what I'm going to be talking about this afternoon, going beyond Lean Six Sigma and the balanced scorecard. I had the good opportunity to speak with Forrest about 3 years ago at a ASQ World Conference in Indianapolis, and he mentioned the IEE book series, and I said, oh, that's really interesting. I'd like to see if I could get somebody in the quality management division to review those books and present some book reviews in our journal. Well, once I got the package of books and I looked through them, I said, this is going to be my project. It's too interesting to hand off to somebody else. And so I put out about 6 different book reviews. Some of them had multiple books that were covered in that particular edition of the forum. And so today I'm going to give a high-level summary of the content of these books. Obviously, I can't do justice to all of the details, but I can point out what is really relevant here that Forrest has brought to us practitioners that we didn't have before. Here's a cross-section of the books. Most of these are hardbound books, except for the manuals, the guides and manuals, which are spiral-bound paperback, which makes them very easy to use. You can lay them out on your desktop and open them up and find the material that you want to very easily. Briefly here, the Integrated Enterprise Excellence System follows the definition of IEE that Breyfogle has created for us. IEE is a sustainable business management governance system which integrates business scorecards, strategies, process improvement efforts so that organizations move toward the 3 R's of business. Everyone doing the right things, doing them right, and at the right time. What we have is a very detailed and structured framework that promotes innovation and continual improvement. Most of us work under those guidelines in our quality management systems, and we appreciate the Plan, Do, Study, Act, Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, and we recognize that continual improvement results from continual efforts to opportunities to make the system work more efficiently, more effectively, and also reduce waste. Here are 4 points in this current slide that impress me as the big benefits of integrated enterprise excellence. I'll refer to that as IEE henceforth to make it a little simpler. IEE recognizes the development of business process, and I put in there performance, management techniques and strategies. I did a quick search on the internet and I couldn't find anything other than business process management listed, multiple consultancies and other white papers and so on. I think IEE addresses performance more than process. We tend to believe in our profession and quality that we are focused on process, which in fact we are, but we really make leaps forward when we take a look at the performance of a system of integrated processes. Breyfogle has given us some points to reference to. Total quality management was set up as a separate entity within an organization to solve quality problems without a whole lot of detail on how that should happen, how teams should work together, and how we should focus on what priorities should be addressed first and other priorities later. Then along comes Six Sigma in the late 80s with a focus on executing projects, and within the project format we had very detailed steps, the DMAIC that we're all familiar with, and the contents of each of those steps, and so that was a big improvement over TQM in many cases for many organizations. The expectation with Six Sigma is that projects will have a validated financial benefit to the organization. And lastly, in our current iteration of business process management, we have IEE, which is in fact an enterprise system for orchestrating business activities, including measurements, quality metrics, and improvements identified in a strategic planning process. And these should have a true impact on bottom line profitability of the organization. Oftentimes we find in Six Sigma projects, if we have a Six Sigma project management office, that we can make savings in one part of the company and not in other parts. And so our net effect is close to zero. In some cases, we can have a result where we're doing less well than when we start, even though we improved the process. And I understand that quite well because I'm a detail person. I enjoy statistical analysis. I enjoy creating pictures from data and speaking to management and communicating the findings as well as to staff in an organization. However, we can sometimes fall into a situation where we're so consumed with the analysis that we forget the purpose of the analysis. And so that's an issue that Forrest has addressed very thoroughly in his book series. There's these two books that are on the next slide here, which really set the stage for the whole process of IEE. Actually, I read the green-colored book, Golfing Buddies, first, and then I read it again later and put it in as the one of the last books reviewed in the Quality Management Forum. It was a phenomenal book. It's written as a novel, and it was so interesting I had a hard time putting it down. Fortunately, it wasn't as long as some of the other editions, so I could get away with a few hours at a time devoted to really appreciating the insights that are contained in that book for those of us who not only are responsible for improvements but also must communicate what we're doing and why we're doing it and what we expect to accomplish. On our next slide here, Volume 2 is a explanation of how to execute an enterprise DMAIC or a process DMAIC, and those are two different resources that Forrest points out where we want to generate a reality where people in the organization at all levels are looking towards metrics to understand the performance of the business as well as their personal contribution to that performance. And that is an area where I found in my own experience where people are working very hard on difficult moments, and they're not really sure where their effort aligns with the strategy of the organization. So this book will give a very detailed discussion of some of the issues and problems that organizations typically encounter, and it will provide some suggestions to make the efforts of the performance improvement team more relevant and more visible or transparent to others in the organization. This book also gives us considerable detail on why traditional business systems can stimulate the wrong behavior. We're all familiar with the concept of low-hanging fruit, something that we can pick at ease without a lot of effort or specialized interventions or equipment or access to information systems that may be insufficient to really tell us much more than a superficial amount about the way things are actually working. One of the highlights in this discussion is firefighting versus fire prevention. And Forrest makes a point in the book that the firefighter's toolkit, and I think all of us know who these individuals are. They're quick in motion, they're a blur against the background, they're always running to meetings but without a lot of contribution in the discussions. And Forrest mentioned that the firefighter's toolkit does not contain root cause analysis, corrective and preventive action, or failure modes and effects analysis, just hot air. And that is somewhat of a comical comment, but I think it's quite true. Fire prevention is what IEE is all about, really, that we want to understand the function of the business well enough to prevent problems before they occur. Or if we do not have a preventive action that's sufficient, we can implement countermeasures in the meantime to avoid consequences, bad consequences of problems until we're in a position to where we can implement a thorough and workable solution to eliminate the problems altogether. Point number 3 on this slide is quite important from my perspective, that we need to establish a culture in the organization that embraces enterprise analytics, not merely functional analytics, embraces scorecards and dashboards. I was in a hospital a year or so ago visiting a friend, and I walked past a wall, and above the numerous charts and tables and so on the wall was the statement quality board. And I looked carefully, and I basically had to put on my glasses, and if I'd have had a magnifying glass I would have used that too, because all of the charts were very detailed Excel types of spreadsheets. There's a lot of color coding, and I really didn't have a good understanding or appreciation of what was being communicated. I think there was some relevant material there, but it was a lot of activity being presented without a lot of presentation of the meaning of that activity and what was being accomplished. And so it would be hard for me as a member of that organization, this was on a nursing ward, a charge nurse or some of the other staff, the medical staff, etc., to walk by there and take a moment to stand and look at that quality wall and understand how are we doing? Are we doing better? What about that project we all heard about in the all-hands meeting, the town hall meeting? What's going on with that? Those kinds of doubts or uncertainties would certainly be present until we get to the point where the culture understands the strategic direction and understands the purpose of analytics, quality metrics, and the appropriate analysis, and see scorecards that tell us how we're doing. Recently in Orlando at a ASQ Technical Communities Conference, Forrest did a presentation, and he made a very significant point. I was sitting in the audience. Actually, it was standing room only. I got there a few minutes late, and I had to stand against the back wall, and I was happy to do so for the duration of the presentation. And Forrest put some data up on the screen, and it was basically in control. 3 or 4, 10 months earlier, there was a out-of-control condition, a special cause of some type, perhaps. And he says, basically, this process is stable. If we look at this data, even though we had one condition way back when, it's pretty much insignificant since in the last year or so, everything has been within expectation. And I thought that was very insightful, that oftentimes we jump at an opportunity to chase after something that may be a problem. Statistically, it's an unlikely event, but with a little bit of research, we find that we'd better spend our time elsewhere. And I think Forrest pointed that out very clearly, that you have to have some degree of appreciation for the data and understand that you have limited resources and time and so on, that you can't chase after everything that looks like it could be a problem. That's a cultural awareness, cultural development that helps us focus on the significant few rather than the insignificant many. Forrest brings up the point in a number of these books on the old-fashioned scorecards dating back to the early 90s, which were pretty much displaced with more current performance dashboards, the red, yellow, green stoplight chart. And I've had many discussions as a consultant about the lack of utility, or in fact uselessness, of those kinds of charts. They're attribute data. They don't tell us how far or ahead or behind schedule. It just tells us that for some reason somebody thinks there's a problem with a red dot and not a problem with a yellow dot, and they may be essentially the same set of underlying circumstances. Okay, here we have volume 3, and this I think is the mother lode of the IEE book series, because number one, it's 1,100 pages, much like the Six Sigma book from 2003. There is so much material here that you really have to read through this book multiple times. I think I read twice, and that was the amount of time that I could devote. But there's so much information in here: the project DMAIC, the enterprise DMAIC, the 30,000-foot level predictive performance metrics, stepping back and seeing the forest instead of the trees, and understanding what the enterprise is doing rather than what individual functional units are doing. We are all familiar with the term functional silo, and information being siloed, being separated, being used in some cases inappropriately against other functional units. And the 30,000-foot level and the 50,000-foot enterprise level that Forrest introduces are ways in which we can look at the entire organization and not get bogged down in too much detail until we get to the point where we need to drill down to that detail to make better informed decisions. This book, as mentioned in the slide, has many examples and many exercises, and I think one of the shortcomings of other resources is that the examples are not realistic. Obviously, Forrest is taking these out of his own consulting practice. They're real-life examples, and the exercises are meaningful in working through both continuous data and attribute data, working towards scorecards and dashboards that executive management as well as line staff can look at and understand what those people in quality are trying to tell us. What are they talking about? The project execution guide is a detailed roadmap, has many templates. I think there's over 100 in there, and this would be a book that I would have open on my desktop, on my desk, and looking for examples that fit the situation that I'm facing in terms of analysis and presentation to various groups of people within the organization. The solution manual is a unique tool in that it includes a CD with data sets. And I think that's really unique, because if I see a book that has a printed set of data, like a printout of a Excel spreadsheet, I'm not likely to key the data in and work with it. However, if the data is already on a CD and I have to just download the file and import it into a stat package, I'm more than likely to work with it, which I did in this case. Forrest uses the Minitab application, which is the de facto standard for quality professionals. So it's very simple to follow the data from source data into a data set within the stat package Minitab, and then the analysis, the scripts are there, so you can follow that. The output is generated and printed in this manual, which is very helpful, especially for people who are new to Six Sigma. Sometimes I know people get a little bit of training and they get a copy of a stat package on their computer, and they're expected to be able to make all that happen in terms of analysis and interpretation. So that's not always the case. It's not easy to do. So these resources that Forrest has spent a lot of time putting together are really, really valuable. The next slide here, I'm going back to volume 2, and there's a question: do you have a strategy? I supervise about 40 or so master's thesis students a year, and I've got well over 800 completed so far in my career in academia. I see so many times where organizations do not have a coherent and clearly presented and appropriately advertised and understood strategy. And so this is one question that Forrest is going to help with in terms of focusing on the need for a strategy, and how is that strategy going to be created and communicated. We are all familiar with theory of constraints, and theory of constraints generally works at the level of processes, and so we have to be careful that we don't get our priorities askew in working in one part of the organization when improvement there could have a detrimental effect elsewhere in the organization. Lean assessment is a very important part of IEE. Whenever we can simplify, we're much better off. Things become clearer, and there's less abstractions. That's obvious on the shop floor, but it's also obvious elsewhere in the organization. The enterprise process value stream mapping function is well defined and discussed in these series. Forrest spends a fair amount of time with innovation and creative processes. How are they promoted in the organization? How do they integrate with business process management? And one thought came to mind when I was reading through this book is that there's a parallel concern in change management. And one of the books that I use in my course here by Dan Cohen, Change Readiness, is the topic. The title of the book, The Heart of Change Field Guide, Tools and Tactics for Leading Change in Your Organization. The nice thing about this book, it coordinates with Cotter's book on change, which is one of the primary resource textbooks in the field, but it also, in chapter 9, or section 9 as he calls it, it also introduces a change readiness survey questionnaire, and it's very well thought out. It's been validated extensively, and it's a useful tool. I have some of my students practice using this so they can determine whether the organization is ready for change to begin with, and the extent of readiness, how easily or difficult will it be to implement a change that we anticipate as we get underway with a Six Sigma project. And also, this survey will give you ideas on how to overcome resistance to change, or how to make change more palatable to different constituencies within the organization. Okay, here we come back to enterprise DMAIC. That's the roadmap for long-lasting enterprise-level analysis. Stepping back to 30,000 and 50,000 foot levels to see the forest above the trees and understand what makes the organization successful in terms of strategic vision. Like I said before, we can spend a lot of time and energy improving processes, but if those improvements don't translate into bottom line improvements, such as with profitability, lead time and cycle times and so on, then we may be wasting our time at best, or at worst, we may be causing the entire system to be sub-optimized. The project DMAIC shows how to effectively integrate Lean and Six Sigma tools for efficiency and effectiveness improvements in program problem interventions. The typical Lean Six Sigma project resource, the project inventory. Here again, there are over 100 attribute and continuous data analyses presented and discussed, an explanation of the intent of the analysis and the value of the analysis in promoting information sharing within the organization. Forrest brings up an interesting idea from Lean in push versus pull, and we all know that our ideal systems are pull-oriented. We don't create excess inventory. We don't even manufacture until there's a demand from the customer. And I've seen this in a large financial institution in the Midwest where a very talented man, he had some extensive experience with George Group and Accenture, and he was hired to come in and create a Six Sigma project office, a performance improvement office, and he was expected to generate or create some number of projects and then push them out into the organization without really spending much time going out and talking to people, walking around and talking to people to find out what their perspective was on what they believed was needed in terms of improvement. So that's a good example of the organization itself pushing projects versus the end users pulling for the resource of the Six Sigma project office. Volume 3 again provides a study guide with realistic business problems, performance data sets typical in the businesses that we all work in or think we know something about because we read about them in the popular press or in business journals. Again, the detailed project execution roadmaps where Forrest makes it pretty difficult for you to get lost. Let me put it that way. I've traveled by motor vehicle across the country a number of times, and I always sat down in the olden days with a map, a physical paper map, and plotted out and used a ruler to measure distance and used the scale to figure out how many miles that would be and how long it would probably take and so on. So nowadays, of course, you can you map the route and drill down, and you can figure out where the gas stations are and the restaurants and all that. Things have gotten a lot easier with the internet, but nevertheless, the same type of activity is being practiced. Understand where you want to get to, and then how you're going to get there, and what you're going to do along the way. Forrest is very adept at Minitab. There's a lot of great examples of using Minitab to analyze real kinds of data that you're likely to encounter and summarize that data in typical fashion. One of the things that he presented at that Orlando conference was an add-in to Minitab, which he provides, which generates a normal probability plot along with the data. And we generally look at the normal probability plot to see if a normal distribution is appropriate as an assumption in analyzing our data, but it also gives us an additional capability where we can overlay a confidence interval and make statements about the percent of observations that we would expect within a range of the mean or average, and the likelihood of seeing outliers or out of control conditions, special cause types of conditions. And so it's a really neat combination of two mini-tab features which allow us to actually see more of the information content in the data. Moving on to the next slide here. Golfing buddies, go beyond Lean Six Sigma balance scorecard. I don't know if the three individuals, the three gentlemen in this book are personal friends of Forrest or not, but there's a tremendous development of the character of these three gentlemen. They're all MBAs, they're in the business world, they've got very responsible positions, and they're all wrestling with process improvements, and they're learning about Six Sigma and more specifically the IEE strategies to use in their own organizations. And it's a fascinating read. It was interesting. I had to laugh many times reading through the statements that were made and the realization that things could be better, but they always had a dedication to doing the best work possible. So here's some of the content here that really stuck out in my mind. The wisdom of the organization. We often overlook this as a source of insight. We can talk to some of our senior people that apparently have more wisdom. At one point, years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I put together a chart which started with data, and I found a quote somewhere. Most organizations are awash in a sea of data, and then we analyze that data and we create some information, and from that information collectively over time we create knowledge about the organization, and eventually the accumulation of that knowledge leads to wisdom. And so what I tried to diagram in a process Forrest has taken and explained in words very effectively about recognizing a dimension in process improvement that many people overlook. Perhaps they're not interested, or they figure it's too much time to go out and talk to people, and so on. What's a robust process, balanced scorecard, some very good detailed descriptions and examples of what a balanced scorecard should look like. How do we determine profitability of the business as opposed to cost of quality or cost of poor quality, as we increasingly see that concept presented. The voice of the business, which we generally think of as the CQ, critical to quality, CTQ metrics. The key performance indicators, the KPIs, which are the voice of our customers. Teams. Forrest spends a fair amount of time in describing what a team should be and how it should function, and so on. I just completed a course in project management with a focus on quality projects, and we set up teams within the course, 6 or 7 students working together, and they have a very difficult time, to be frank, in working together. They manage to do it, but there's a lot of consternation and a lot of discussion about how we should get on with the project. So Forrest gives us some great insights on team building and teamwork and working together for a common goal. And also the role of champions. I've been in projects where I had a great champion and the project just it moved along so easily it was somewhat frightening. And other cases it was equally frightening because nothing happened because the champion was either ineffective or non-existent. So that's another great discussion at the outset of any kind of change project. To seek out and enlist and place on the project team a good champion. And the next slide here talks about the execution guide, and this is a very much designed for practitioners, the black belts on the team, as well as project managers and team managers in terms of what is Lean Six Sigma going to do here. What is it going to do for one point, and how is it going to do that so that there's good communications about project status. That's always an area that can use some improvement, communicating what the project is doing, and oftentimes we encounter a need for something to be added, a change order, and that has to be explained, and the project generally has to be modified to accommodate something that we know we need, we didn't anticipate it. Be honest and get that in there and make it happen along with the rest of the project objectives. Relating Lean Six Sigma to the strategic goals of the organization, the strategic plan. Occasionally you'll hear about Hoshin Kanri as a strategy within quality programs. It's fairly complex and time-consuming, but even looking at the templates, you can get a good idea of what needs to be done, what needs to be considered, even if you don't have the resources to do a full-blown strategic plan within that level of detail. You can certainly take a look at what would be advantage in your particular situation. Forrest offers a standardized planning methodology. It's consistent from the beginning to the end. I've been very fortunate in having so many students over the years that I've accumulated a very nice project milestones, or what they call toll gate review criteria, pulling from big government, big industry, and obviously some consulting organizations along the way. And what Forrest has here is everything that goes on within the 5 steps of a DMAIC project in detail and consistent and understandable and easily communicated. In summary here, we have some points that Forrest and I would like to share with everyone. You can go on to his Smarter Solutions website and look at these links. You can sign in and enter your name and create a password and gain access to some tremendously valuable resources. It's just amazing that those who are the biggest givers obviously receive the biggest rewards, and Forrest is a tremendous giver. He really shares a lot of information. He shares it in person at conferences, and he shares it on his website. So I'd encourage you to take a look here and take advantage of some opportunities. And I always say to myself, why reinvent the wheel when someone smarter than me has already done that work? And so at the very least, it's more than I could accomplish on my own, but more than likely I will use it, and it will stimulate some ideas, and I will modify or add to in my own way. The books that I've been speaking about this afternoon are available on Forrest's website or through Amazon.com. And obviously there's a coupon here that you can use and get a discount. That would be a great investment. I was very fortunate to obtain this series through the generosity of Forrest Breyfogle, and I would say that this is tremendously valuable information that should be in your library. I do teach at California State University, Dominguez Hills. I wanted to put this information up because I find that many of our students find us other professionals, and there's always somebody that's looking to increase their skill set, increase their value to the organization, and promote themselves in terms of their career. And so I put these links in here. You can get on board and take a look at our program. Most of the students take about 3.5 to 5 3.5 to 4 years to complete because they're working professionals like most of you are. They've got 10 to 12, 15 years of experience. They're in responsible positions, and they don't have all day long every day during the week to go to school, so they fit in a course or two each semester, and they're able to graduate, like I said, in 3.5 to 4 years. So there's some a Facebook link and a LinkedIn link and a brief description of what this program is. You can look at the link at the top of the page and go there and see the courses that are offered, the core courses and the elective courses, and see if this might be a good fit for you at this point in your life. Okay, any questions that people have had? I think that has been capturing these along the way, and I'm open to any questions. I may not be able to answer everything, but I'll certainly try.
Robert, thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. You've clearly read the material, clearly have grasped the material, and thank you for sharing kind of your hard to get couple of points on the material. So we definitely appreciate your presentation. All attendees are available to submit any questions that you have. I do actually have Forrest Breifogel with me here today, so he is open for questions as well. And Robert, thank you also for accepting questions. I would like to start with this, Robert. You did talk about, you gave lots of great examples, and I know just from working with you, you've worked in academia, you've worked in Fortune 500 companies, government, you've been in the quality field, I think we said since the 70s. So you've got lots of experience, but you're also very passionate about the IEE approach. Based on what you've read in the IEE books, and when you go back to your example of the quality wall at the hospital, in your work as a consultant, if you were implementing the IEE approach, where would you start with that? You mentioned the quality wall at the hospital, and just your eyes were kind of glazing over the material, and there was not a culture of being in alignment with the strategy of the organization. Where would you start?
I would start everywhere in the organization that I had access. I think everywhere from the worker on the line, the customer-facing service representative. Toyota Kata by Mike Rother tells us how Toyota recognizes the value of input from everybody within the organization, particularly those at the line, helping to educate and train their supervisors and managers. And I think that this is a system. It belongs to those in the system, which is everybody. We can talk top down, bottom up, or we can talk just an approach that takes everybody into consideration as an equal in quality, that has an input, that has a voice. We have our internal customers, obviously. Oftentimes they're overlooked or neglected or worse. And when people believe that they're being listened to, they're more likely to speak up. And when they speak up, we have a chance to hear from them what they feel, their attitudes, beliefs, opinions, and so on. And I think that IEE is an attractive approach. It's not complicated. If we get down into the details of Lean Six Sigma, we quickly get into tech talk that goes over the head of many professionals. I know that our managers, if they're MBAs, they've taken operations research, they've done analysis, they understand it, but they may not have the time to spend with it. So somebody has to come in who's comfortable going around and talking to various levels of the organization, all levels if possible, and getting buy-in that we have something to offer here. It's going to require your input for it to be successful. That input is invaluable. We can't get it anywhere else. We want to hear from you. We want you to participate. We want to make sure that we communicate appropriately what's in the strategic plan. And Forrest gives examples of a strategic plan where each layer of the organization interprets a little differently. They interpret within their sphere of influence and their sphere of information inputting onto them. And so that would be my response, Elon, to try and engage and communicate with the cross-section of the organization.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you, Robert. Forrest, thanks for joining us again today.
Yes, Robert, I really appreciate all the time that you took reviewing the books, and it was an excellent summary of what you put together here for this session here. I wanted to highlight that. Now, just expanding upon what you said, I think what you said is really important to get the buy-in of everybody in the organization. And what I'd also like to suggest also is the value chain, which I pointed out in the books, which really is describing what you do and how you measure what you do. So you're kind of linking together the scorecards from that 30,000-foot level point of view of reporting, and also the processes associated with it. You can kind of put that all together in a value chain, and then everybody can kind of eventually get the point that you can kind of click through it, and maybe eventually it's also automatically updated. So you got more of a transparency of metrics throughout the organization, so that you don't necessarily have executives seeing a lot of filtered information, and because a lot of times what happens is that we tend to kill the messengers, and people are afraid of being honest with it. So I think with the value chain, that's another piece that can get the voice of what's really happening down the bottom from metrics and process point of view. So that's another point that I'd add to this overall mix to answer that question too. And again, thanks, Robert.
Yeah. That's excellent, Forrest, because with the example in the hospital, I asked the charge nurse and a couple of the other regular duty nurses, what do they see or what do they find in the quality wall? And they say, well, we're really not sure. And I said, do you have a sense that what you do every day contributes to the betterment of service to your patients here? Well, on an individual level, we think we do, but we don't know how what we do is perceived by management, really, because we have a bunch of numbers there, and we don't know how those numbers get communicated. Exactly the point that you're making, that can we always transfer significant knowledge and wisdom through tables of data or charts? I'm not sure.
Yeah, because again, as far as here, yeah, a lot of times the table of numbers and red, yellow, green scorecard, they're not viewing the enterprise as a process. You know, they don't talk about, like Deming talks about, variability, you know, and where he's mostly talking about at the lower level, I'm talking about, hey, let's take that at the higher level. You know, it's overall defective rates or on-time deliveries, you know, and you could have several different products. You know, how do you put that all together and communicate that at a level in the organization so people understand it's not just needing next quarter's number or next month or next week's number and turn into red. How do we look at the variability of our process? And if we've got high-level common cause variability and we've got a 10% non-conformance rate, the only way we can change that over time is really doing something different to the process. And that's what our 30,000-foot level metrics can be a good way of baselining that any particular metric, and then see if an improvement was actually made through a Six Sigma project or Kaizen event or whatever. So I think that's a really important message that people start looking at it from. And I think that would be really helpful in that hospital situation that you talked about there.
Right. And I've heard you mention in person and also throughout the books that sometimes we take a look at the process and the variability, and it's acceptable for the moment. Does it really need to be improved when there could be other areas of the organization from the enterprise level that need more help?
Yeah, that's exactly right, because a lot of times it's easy for the top of the organization, executives say every metric should improve 5%. Well, just stop to think about it. Once you get past to what you're talking about, the low-hanging fruit, that could be impossible to do, for everyone. So you got to pick your battle, and even theory constraints can help you with that. And when you start looking at the big picture, you can come out and figure out which areas strategically I should be working on that's going to affect your metrics. And getting relative to that push and pull comment you make, we'd like to go in and look at which metrics we want to improve, and the owner of that now understands that's a strategic metric it needs improved, and they're going to be pulling for that project to get done, so it's not going to be falling off somebody's plate. That's quite different than let's look at how much money we save from all these projects, which kind of comes, like you said, a push for project creation in the traditional Lean Six Sigma deployment.
Right, and one of the points you make throughout your text is that there's an issue with sustainability. And I know that most Six Sigma projects have a follow-on activity to keep the accomplishments of the project in the forefront of people's minds, but time tends to erode the interest, and other priorities and interventions come into force. So keeping those high-level enterprise metrics in the forefront serves to promote sustainability of change, I believe.
Oh yes, I agree with you. One of the big challenges with Lean Six Sigma is the last step is control. And with this value change I'm talking about, if that's one of the metrics that's important in the business that you just improved, you can actually have that so it's automatically updated and people can go in and check in it. So it's not one of these situations you take the spotlight off of it, all of a sudden people forget about it and they go back their old ways. No, it's going to be available there and readily checkable by anybody that wants to do it at any point in time from any level of the organization that has access to that particular metric. That's what I think we'd like to go towards.
Wow, great discussion here. A couple of other questions that are coming in. Thanks, Robert and Forrest. One attendee pointed out there is a lot of material in these books. Yes, there is. And as Robert pointed out, one of the books is over 1,100 pages. And so there's a question of being able to search these on the web, search the table of contents. As Robert mentioned, the books are available on Amazon.com as ebooks. They're also available for purchase through Smarter Solutions or Amazon. So there is that searchable, web searchable table of content that kind of addresses that. Also, there's a question about the slides in the presentation. This is being recorded, so a link will be provided to you all for attending that you can share with others who may not have been able to attend live. Go ahead. We do have one final minute. If there are any last-minute questions, please go ahead and submit that. We have time for maybe one more. And I would like to also point out, Robert, you made a mention of the roadmap, and you shared with us, if you're driving across the country, you used to pull out the big map and try to piece that together, but Forrest makes it difficult to get lost with the roadmap that he's provided in the books. I would like to make mention that Forrest did a presentation last month on the roadmap. That webinar is available online at smartersolutions.com in the resource library. So feel free to check that out, and that's Forrest sharing about the roadmap. Last question we've got here. Let's see. There's a question on having much merit. Forrest's approach has much merit, but there's a question about Paul Harmon raising a number of points. Forrest, would you like to speak to that on the BPT trends?
BPM trends, yeah. Because there's a lot of one of the things that's really different than Paul Harmon. He we have like business process management, you know, and a lot of times what's happening, I think, is missing is the scorecard aspect of it. So we've had a lot of business system out there, but it's really not addressing, in my mind, adequately how we look at metrics. And that's one of the big differentiators, I think, of the IEE system. You know, there's a tendency is to go in and say we're going to establish all these goals in our business management system, and it's somebody's objective to go in and achieve those goals. So that's the way we tend to be managing it. However, you know, that can lead to a lot of unhealthy behaviors. And for example, like even the BP oil spill, you say, well, I'm suggesting this IEE system could actually have prevented that, you know, or even the Bluebell ice cream listeria bacteria contamination. You know, and they say, well, how can you do that? Well, a lot of times what we don't have is transparency of metrics. For example, BP had some safety incidences, and then finally everything really went awry, and the people at the top didn't necessarily know what happened because they're going to kill the messenger if you go up the hill with it. And then maybe the same thing happened at Bluebell. So I'm suggesting you want to have really transparency of metrics from a process point of view, and that's what typically seems to be lacking in the business process management arena, the BPM arena. And I think that that's one thing we do. And again, what we do have is software that really addresses this. Now, one of the things that was on one of the slides that I would suggest that you check out, there's a video on stopfirefighting.com. Stopfirefighting.com. I'd suggest you check out that video. It only lasts 1 minute, but we try to make it so it's a compelling video that people could link to it to describe what this actually IEE system accomplishes. And you know, that's one of the things that I think is really, I got a passion about this 30,000 foot level reporting. So hopefully, and I got, like you're talking about a lot on the Resource Center, you know, I've got a lot of articles on that also that I think you could find to be really beneficial. So hopefully you take the time to check it out.
Great. Well, thanks, Forrest. StopFirefighting.com. Robert's again with the ASQ Quality Management Forum. Robert, thank you so much for your time today. And to all of you who attended, thank you for your time as well. There will be a survey when you exit the webinar. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you next month.